Getting girls is hard. It's never been harder in human history for a guy to go up and talk to a girl. If you approach a woman, you risk getting arrested for sexual harassment. Women have become increasingly picky about who they're willing to date. Girls on social media now talk openly about how they won't settle for anyone except a man in finance, trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes. Their standards have gotten so high that 99% of men are not even considered, and therefore you may as well just give up. These are the kinds of cock-blocking narratives you will hear on social media these days. And if you believe this, you have been psyop'd. A psyop is a psychological operation. Governments and non-state actors around the world use psyops to influence and control events by changing how large masses of people perceive the world. Now, what I've just outlined, this narrative that getting girls is hard, has become a mass belief. Pretty much every young man now believes this or some version of this, but it was not always like this. You know, back when I was growing up in the early 2000s, this despair narrative was believed only by a tiny minority of quote-unquote incels online. It was a fringe view that virtually no one agreed with. And yet today, this narrative is basically mainstream. It's what gets the most views, it's what gets the most likes, it's what gets the most positive comments. Why? Well, first of all, I want to preface this by saying I'm not American. However, I've come to believe that certain states that are the geopolitical enemies or rivals of America are attempting to spread this and various other messages through the English-speaking internet. The goal, I believe, is to demoralize the population of America and other English-speaking countries. Now, I have absolutely no proof of this. It's just a gut instinct. I'm not going to say which foreign power is doing this, although I think you can probably guess. Now, I think that there are many different psyops going on online aimed at influencing different segments of the population. But why specifically this emphasis on young men and why it's hopeless for young men to approach women? Well, think about this logically. What is the result of men giving up on women? The result is less people having sex and less babies. What does less babies mean? Lower population. But why does population matter? Because population is power. Countries with the highest populations tend to be the most powerful. This is one of the reasons why all the governments of the West are trying to import massive amounts of immigrants from other parts of the world. It's really simple. They want population numbers to go up because population equals power. Now, the corollary to this is that if you wanted to attack another country, or if you wanted to weaken them and disempower them, and assuming you were willing to be patient and take a long-term perspective, the absolute best way to do this would be to lower their population by any means necessary. And how might you do that? Well, you would do it by discouraging people from having sex. Now, there's a problem with this. People like sex. People want to have sex. It feels good and it's why we're all here. But how might you be able to make them not like sex? Well, one thing you could do is to associate the idea of sex with a lot of fear. You might try to spread a narrative among young women that all men are rapists and that they should report any man who makes them feel uncomfortable to the police. At the same time, you would spread the mirror image of this narrative to young men. Don't approach women because they're disgusted by you. And if you try to talk to them, they'll scream at you and call the police. Now, if you were successful in making those narratives go mainstream, what would that result in? Young people would have less sex. More of them would stay single than ever before. And as a result, the population would get lower and lower and lower. Again, this is over a long time frame. It wouldn't happen overnight. But if you started doing this in, say, 2010, then maybe it would be starting to bear fruit by now. But hey, that's just a crazy conspiracy theory, right? Now listen, if you allow yourself to be brainwashed by this psyop, then getting girls will indeed be hard. See, part of what makes any psyop effective is that it usually doesn't lie. It's not just making up things that aren't true. Rather, it focuses your mind on things that may be partially true, but which are extremely disempowering and demoralizing, instead of focusing your mind on the things that are both true and empowering. See, if the psyop was simply lying, like if it said, don't approach girls because if you do, they'll spray you with green poison gas from out of their mouth, then no one would believe it because it's obviously absurd. But the idea that you would approach a girl and she would accuse you of harassing her and call the police sounds plausible to a guy who's never done a cold approach. And so what this psyop, like all effective psyops, does is it takes some fear or doubt that's already in the victim's mind and then enlarges it so it becomes larger than life. Understand this, a psyop will almost never try to implant some new or alien idea into your head. Instead, it takes something you already believe or suspect and then blows it out of proportion in order to demoralize you. In this case, it takes the fear of rejection or the fear of making girls uncomfortable that's already in the mind of every single guy and then exaggerates that fear until it cripples you, until it becomes completely neurotic, hysterical, overpowering. Now, like I said, I'm not an American. I don't have a dog in this fight. But if you're watching this video, it means, like me, you're part of the English-speaking internet. And if that's the case, then you can pretty comfortably assume that you are being targeted by various different powerful forces to demoralize you and to change your perception in a way that weakens you. What I want to do in this video is show you why, despite everything you've been told and how you've been brainwashed, getting girls is actually easy. And part of this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. If you program your subconscious to believe that getting girls is hard, it's going to focus on all the ways that's true. But if you allow yourself to realize that in many ways, getting girls is actually objectively quite easy, now you're beginning to notice for the first time all the opportunities to get girls that you used to be blind to. Now, this video is largely going to be about mindset, what's called inner game. I'm not going to be giving you many practical tips for how to approach girls or flirt with them or exactly what to say, because you can already find plenty of that stuff in my other videos and my courses, or even in videos and courses by other teachers. But in a very real sense, your mindset and the way you view getting girls is actually infinitely more important and more effective than any specific thing you do. The Bible says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind." There is a worldly way to view things, according to so-called common sense, but there is another way to view things. It happens when your mind has been renewed, washed clean, transformed, awakened. Jesus says we need to become like little children again. Now, when you're a very small child, you don't fear rejection. You can talk to anybody your age and it's not a big deal. You might be a little bit shy around them at first, but if you put young kids together, they almost immediately become friends. Back when I was in preschool, I remember I went up and asked almost every girl in my class if she wanted to be my girlfriend. And many of them actually said yes. And I remember I drew this picture of me holding hands with about a dozen girls from my class. And when my parents asked me about it, I told them, completely matter-of-factly, that this was a picture of me and my girlfriends. And they obviously laughed at that, And of course, I was 5 years old or something. I had no idea what the term girlfriend even meant, and neither did they. But the innocence of that, the purity of that, is that I was not anticipating a negative response. And even the girls who did say no, of who I'm sure there were many, did not cause me to feel any negative emotion or sense of rejection. But then, somewhere along the line, like all of us, I lost my way. When you get to puberty, you start having sexual desires. You start being conscious of the fact that you're a virgin and that this is a quote-unquote bad thing. And you become conscious that women are the only ones who hold the key to unlock you from this prison of your virginity. And so now, unlike when you were a little child, you actually want something from them. You need them to behave in a certain way, or else you will be frustrated and unhappy. Now, what I'm suggesting to you is, why not simply have the same approach to meeting women as you used to have to making new friends when you were a child? Again, do you remember being about 5 years old? You're put in a classroom next to some kid you don't know. You ask him, "Do you want to be my friend?" And he goes, "Yeah." And now you're friends, just like that. And often as not, when you're that age, that's how you meet some of your best friends, the people you're friends with for years afterwards. But again, somewhere along the line, we go wrong. We start making things far more complicated than they need to be. And some people say, well, it's about trauma, you have these bad experiences, maybe you're going along happy as Larry at 5, playing it fast and loose like I've outlined here. But then you ask some kid to be your friend, and maybe because he's a little nuts, instead of saying yes, he says, "Fuck you," and he stabs you with a pencil or something. And then as a result of that, you get hang-ups. The pain and the shock and the fear and the sense of betrayal leaves a permanent mark, and you never make yourself vulnerable in that way again. Or maybe, as I'm assuming must have happened to me at some point, but I'm not remembering, you go up and ask some girl, be my girlfriend. And instead of saying yes, she says, "No, you're ugly," and she runs away. And so again, the pain and the shock leaves an imprint. You learn, quote unquote. That is to say, you get conditioned to feel fear around that stimulus in the future. And so you never make yourself vulnerable with a girl in that way again. Now, this is talked about in the Bible, Genesis 1. When it says that eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is what caused Adam and Eve to be expelled from the Garden of Eden. Now, this is actually a very strange lesson when you think about it, because you would logically think, based on our modern understanding of Christianity and Judaism, that knowing the difference between good and evil would be a good thing, because we want to do good and avoid evil, right? So of course, you'd have to be able to distinguish them. But no. The great mystics who wrote Genesis actually say the opposite. What they appear to be suggesting in the text is that knowing the difference between good and evil is the root of all our problems. And in this sense, Genesis is actually a lot more similar to Eastern spiritual traditions, like Taoism and Buddhism, than it is to what came later in Western religion. Because Taoism and Buddhism and Vedanta and all these Eastern schools say exactly the same thing. The big root of all our problems, the essence of our delusion, they say, is duality, dualistic thinking, dualistic conceptions. It's believing in and being emotionally affected by the delusion that there are independently existing opposites, such as good and bad, painful and pleasant, difficult and easy, and every other duality or pair of opposites you can think of. And what these Eastern schools all taught is that the essence of enlightenment and liberation is dissolving these dualities. It's about awakening to the objective fact that hard and easy, for example, depend on each other. They mutually support each other. You can't have one without the other. They're not opposites. They're both part of a bigger picture. Trying to have good without bad is like trying to have a front without a back. Or take painful and pleasant, for example. We've all been taught that being rejected by a girl is painful, while success, like having sex or a loving relationship, is pleasurable. But is rejection actually painful? It's not painful on a physical level. It's not like being stabbed or being punched. You may have a physical response to rejection, such as your heart beating faster or your mouth drying up. Now, you've been told by society to interpret that as bad, as being pain and suffering. But is it? Or is it just simply what it is? Your heart is beating faster and your mouth is dry. That's all. Bad or pain or suffering are then labels which you overlay on this based on a deluded, dualistic conception of reality. But remove those words and labels and it becomes just another experience, neither good nor bad. Your heart beating faster is not any worse than your heart beating slower. When you actually look at what you're experiencing in your body, it's not inherently bad, but we just interpret it that way. And what's more, you can't have the good without the bad. You can't have sex and love with some girls without being rejected or laughed at or rudely treated by others. The two things are not opposites. They're all part of a greater whole. But this doctrine of non-duality in the mystical traditions goes even further. Awakening to non-duality means that at the deepest level, there is no lasting or meaningful difference between you and other people. We are all one consciousness, experiencing itself subjectively. We are all one mind. Now, this is what they call in magic an initiated view of things. It's not something that can be proven intellectually. It's something you have to have a personal experience of, which I talked about in my previous video. But what this non-duality between you and other people means is that when you approach a girl, you are really, in a sense, approaching yourself. If you kiss her, you are kissing yourself. If she rejects you and throws a drink in your face, she's throwing a drink on herself. And when you realize this, and when you really begin to internalize it, it gives you this knowing little smile in your face. Because you realize that nothing that happens can ever be wrong. And people see you and they think, just what does he know exactly? He seems to know something that I don't. And it gives him a freedom that I don't have, but that I wish I did have. And they're quite right, because you do know something. You know that you are them and they are you. But they're wrong insofar as they think they don't know it, because they do know this. We all do. They just don't know that they know it yet. Whatever you do to other people, you are doing to yourself. Because you are not your body. You are the infinite and immortal consciousness that is looking out through your eyes. And this is the same consciousness that is looking out through every other set of eyes in the world. Your body will die, but this consciousness cannot die. And that is who you actually are. Beneath all the bullshit, beneath all the programming, you are the infinite, boundless, empty, blank, unprogrammed, unconditioned consciousness that created this world and now dwells within it. You were not born, nor can you ever die. You have temporarily chosen to take the form of a limited physical body in order to perceive reality subjectively. Now here's the thing. This applies to everyone else as well, including your enemies, including the people you hate, the people who laugh at you, the people you're afraid of, and including also the people you love or desire and the girls you want to bang. All of these people are you. The consciousness that looks out through your eyes is the same consciousness that looks out through theirs. It's just being conditioned differently by their body and their life history than it has been in yours. It's like if you put your right hand in a bucket of cold water and your left hand touching wood. Your right hand cannot feel the wood. It can only feel the water. It only gets information from a limited set of local stimuli. And yet both hands obviously belong to the same person. And you, as the higher consciousness, are feeling both the water and the wood at the same time. But each of your individual hands can only perceive what's directly in front of them. And it's exactly the same with separate so-called people, separate individuals. We think we're separate from others because we cannot see the world through their eyes. But this is like your right hand thinking that only it is real and not realizing it's part of a greater whole. When you hurt another person or want to hurt them, it's as stupid as if your left hand was to stab your right hand, not realizing that it is part of the same being and that you are literally hurting yourself. Now, to return to our theme and the title of this video, how does knowing this make getting girls easy? Well, it makes it easy because when you begin to meditate on this, when you begin to focus on all the ways that it's true, and to internalize this philosophy so it becomes a permanent part of you, this will tend to make you very zen about things. If a girl rejects you, it's all good. It's not that big of a deal. If she likes you, it's also not a big deal. You don't become obsessed with her and start thinking about her 24 hours a day. You don't become hyper-fixated on the fear of losing her. Whatever happens, it's all good, baby. Or what if the absolute worst case scenario takes place? What if you approach a girl who's with her friends and they all laugh at you? And what if she says, "What a loser. This ugly freak thinks he can approach moi? Get him, boys." And then all her male friends come in and they start pointing at you and laughing. And they pull your pants down and they film you and they put it on TikTok. And then it goes viral and you're on the national news. And even Trump is making fun of you. And everyone is laughing at you. Well, what then? Well, when you are enlightened, which again simply means recognizing non-duality, nothing more. If something like this were to happen to you, you would just laugh. See, why do we feel embarrassed when we get mocked or laughed at or rejected? It's because our ego, our individual sense of self, is hurt. But if you recognize that you are not just your ego, you are also all other people, just as they are also you, then when they laugh at you, they are laughing at themselves. When they reject you, they're rejecting themselves. And what's more, if people are laughing at quote-unquote you, that is to say, if they're laughing at your ego, there's nothing whatsoever to stop you from taking a step to the side and laughing at you, that is your ego, right along with them. Now, those of them who are not enlightened will tend to find this very confusing, although very often they'll also find it to be rather charming and endearing. It is because of this approach, this mindset, that I've often been in situations where a girl initially rejected my approach or was mean to me or, mocked me or gave me some kind of shit test. But because I laughed at quote-unquote me along with her, she ended up becoming rather fond of me. And in many cases, we later ended up sleeping together. Now, if you still see things dualistically, then being humiliated and socially ostracized is a very, very serious thing. But when you awaken to non-dual awareness, you realize that nothing is serious. Nothing can be serious. Everything is a joke. One person described the experience of Satori, awakening to non-duality, in this way. All at once, without warning of any kind, I found myself wrapped in a flame-colored cloud. For an instant, I thought of fire. Then I knew the fire was within myself. Directly afterward, there came upon me a sense of exultation, of immense joyousness, immediately followed by an intellectual illumination impossible to describe. Among other things, I did not merely come to believe, but I saw that the universe is not composed of dead matter, but is, on the contrary, a living presence. I became conscious in myself of eternal life. It was not a conviction that I would have eternal life, but a consciousness that I possessed eternal life already. I saw that all men are immortal, that the cosmic order is such that without any doubt, all things work together for the good of each and all, that the foundation principle of the world, of all worlds, is what we call love, and that the happiness of each and all is, in the long run, absolutely certain. The vision lasted a few seconds and was gone, but the memory of it, and the sense of the reality of what it taught, has remained during the quarter of a century which has since elapsed. Part of the essence of this kind of experience is that, as he said, all things work together for the good of each and all. Everything is perfect exactly as it is. If a girl rejects you, it's perfect. If she goes to bed with you, that's also perfect. And everything in between that is exactly as it should be too. Awakening means transcending all dualities, such as rejection and sex, failure and success, pain and pleasure, humiliation and triumph, embarrassment and ease, and perhaps the most delusionary duality of all, the false impression that you and the girl are separate and independent individuals, rather than being two cells of the same universal body, two thoughts of one universal mind. And when you dissolve those dualities and unify the opposites, as they say in alchemy, then dealing with women goes from being hard to being easy. Approaching them is easy, talking to them is easy, flirting with them is easy. Assuming you do a little bit of research by watching channels like this one to learn the basics of how to do those things. And then you simply come across as a warm person who gets along with everyone. You're just a normal, friendly guy. That's the baseline. No better than anyone else, no worse than anyone else. And then if they like you, they like you, and if they don't, they don't. And it's not that big of a deal. Now, having watched this video, you can go back out into the world. and you will see people talk about how hard it is to meet women, and you will laugh. As a commenter in my last video said, I just applied your teachings and it worked wonders. Just got a makeout in several numbers this evening. Visiting 4chan boards made me think in terms of separate groups and socializing, divided. But your teachings of the quote-unquote LSD frame, the LSD experience, in particular when you said that we are all part of one unified consciousness, helped me to connect with others immensely. I would like to give you a big thanks because it's really hard to get over all these psyops once you're influenced by them. Your channel is really the medicine for all this mind war that is happening over social media. So, this video was about mindset. But if you'd like to learn more practical tips and advice about specifically how to flirt with women in a way that makes them chase you, how to make them fall in love with you, and how to finally eliminate flaking, ghosting, and rejection forever, I would strongly recommend you to check out my newest and best program, the Girlfriend Button. I've put everything I've learned about getting girls into it, and it's allowed me to attract girlfriends like these. And the Girlfriend Button lets you lock down smoking hot girlfriends no matter your looks, age, or money. Inside the course, I give you the exact texts I've used to make perfect 10s fall in love with me, all based on a scientific mind control technique called predictive programming. Predictive programming is the secret sauce I found to eliminate ghosting, eliminate rejection, because it literally allows you to brainwash girls into becoming completely obsessed with you just by saying a few simple words to them at the right time. Click the link in the description to watch my secret forbidden video on the next page. This is something I cannot post on YouTube because it's a little bit too naughty, but if you watch that video, I will show you exactly what to say to a girl to make her fall head over heels in love with you until she's literally butt naked, down on her knees, and begging to be your girlfriend, with all that entails. So if that sounds good, click the link in the description now and discover 12 magic words that psyop any girl into falling madly in love with you, no matter your looks or money.